I stood in that courtroom with my hands shaking so badly I had to clasp them together just to keep them still. My heart was pounding in my chest like it was trying to break free. The judge sat up there behind his big wooden desk, looking down at my mother with an expression I couldn't quite read. He had just asked her a simple question, but the way he said it made the entire room go silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "Mrs. Bennett," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Can you explain to this court why you gave your daughter Vanessa full control of your late husband's estate, but left Cora with absolutely nothing?" I watched my mother's face. I'd seen that face my whole life. I knew every expression, every little movement. And right then, I watched all the color drain out of her cheeks. She looked like someone had just slapped her. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. She closed it, opened it again. I could see her lawyer leaning toward her, probably trying to tell her what to say, but she wasn't listening. Because, ... She finally started, and her voice was shaking. I'd never heard my mother's voice shake like that before, because Cora was never as mature as her sister. She couldn't handle that kind of responsibility. She was trying to protect the family assets. The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd heard versions of this my whole life, it's never mature enough, never responsible enough, never good enough. But hearing her say it out loud in front of a judge, here in front of lawyers and strangers, it hurt in a way I didn't expect. The judge looked down at the stack of documents in front of him. He took his time, reading something, his finger tracing along the page. Then he looked at me. Our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something there. Something like understanding, maybe even sympathy. Then he looked back at my mother. "Bennett," he said slowly, carefully, like he was choosing each word with purpose. "According to these financial records that have been submitted to this court, your daughter Cora has been paying your mortgage. For the last 3 years, every single month. She's paid over $40,000 to keep you from losing your home." I saw my mother's eyes widen. She glanced at me, then quickly looked away. The judge continued. "Vanessa, on the other hand, the daughter you deemed more mature and responsible, has drained the estate account from $207,000 down to $23. It's $23, Mrs. Bennett. In 6 months, my mother's." Lawyer actually put his head in his hands. I could see his shoulders slump forward like all the air had gone out of him. I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. Honestly, I felt kind of numb, like I was watching this happen to someone else, not me. Like I was floating somewhere above my own body, looking down at this sad, broken family that used to be mine. But let me back up, because this story doesn't really start in a courtroom. It starts 6 years earlier on the worst day of my life. The day we buried my father. My name is Cora Bennett. I'm 28 years old now, but I was only 22 when my dad died of cancer. He fought it for 2 years, and I was there for every single moment. Every doctor's appointment, every chemo session, every night when he couldn't sleep because the pain was too bad. My father was my hero. He was the only person in my entire family who ever really saw me, who understood me, who believed in me when nobody else did. My older sister Vanessa was always the golden child. From the time we were little kids, she could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. She got straight as without even trying. She was beautiful, with perfect hair that always looked like she'd just stepped out of a salon. She had the perfect boyfriend, a guy named Tyler who looked like he belonged in a toothpaste commercial. She worked in marketing at some fancy company downtown and made good money, or at least that's what everyone thought. She wore designer clothes and posted pictures of her perfect life all over Instagram. And then there was me. I was the disappointment, the troublemaker, the one who couldn't get her life together. I dropped out of college after 2 years, and my mother never let me forget it. But she never asked why I dropped out. She never wanted to know that I left school to help Dad run his construction business when he got too sick to do it himself. I learned everything from him. How to read blueprints, how to manage a crew, how to deal with clients and suppliers. I wore jeans with paint stains and drove a beat-up Ford truck that was older than me. I didn't fit my mother's picture of what success was supposed to look like, but Dad always told me something I held on to like a lifeline. He'd put his hand on my shoulder, look me right in the eyes and say, "Cora, you've got more grit and heart than anyone I've ever known. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. Did you hear me?" I heard him. I just wish he was still here too. Remind me the day after we buried my father. I woke up in my tiny apartment with swollen eyes and a headache that felt like someone was driving nails into my skull. I'd cried so hard the night before that my entire face hurt. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the person staring back at me. My dad was gone. The only person who ever made me feel like I mattered was just gone. And I didn't know how to exist in a world without him. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Family meeting at the house, 2:00. Don't be late." I almost didn't go. I almost stayed in bed and pulled the covers over my head and let the world disappear. But something Dad used to say kept echoing in my mind. "Bennett, women don't run from hard things, Cora. We face them head on." So I dragged myself out of bed, put on the same black dress I'd worn to the funeral because it was the only nice thing I owned, and drove to my childhood home. When I walked in, Vanessa was already there, sitting on the couch like she owned the place. She looked perfect. Of course, hairstyled, makeup flawless. Her boyfriend Tyler sat next to her, his arm around her shoulders like he was comforting her. Like she was the one who'd spent 2 years watching our father fade away. Like she was the one who'd held his hand when he took his last breath. I wanted to scream at her. "Where were you, Vanessa? Where were you when Dad couldn't get out of bed? Where were you during the 3A.M. emergency room visits? Where were you when he was so weak he couldn't even lift a glass of water?" But I didn't say anything, just sat down in the chair across from them and waited. Mom came in a few minutes later, carrying a folder full of papers. She didn't hug me, didn't ask how I was doing. She just sat down and cleared her throat like she was about to give a business presentation. "Your father left some things behind," she said, her voice flat and businesslike. "The house, his construction business. Some savings and investments. Spent the last few days meeting with lawyers and accountants, figuring out how to handle everything." I nodded. I knew Dad had been smart with money even when he was sick and the medical bills were piling up. He'd always made sure to take care of things, to plan ahead. It was one of the things I loved most about him. He was responsible, steady, the kind of man you could count on. "I've made a decision," Mom continued, and for the first time, she looked directly at me. There was something in her eyes that made my stomach twist. "I'm putting Vanessa in charge of everything. The estate, the business, all the financial decisions. She'll be the executor." The room started spinning. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs until there was no air left. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Cora, please don't make a scene," Mom said, and her voice had that sharp edge it always got when she was annoyed with me. "This is already difficult enough without you being dramatic." Dramatic. I'd just lost my father, and she was calling me. Dramatic. I don't understand, I said, and I hated how my voice cracked. I hated that I sounded weak and broken. I ran that business with Dad for 2 years. I know every client, every supplier, every single project we have going. I know that business inside and out. "Exactly," Mom said, setting the folder down on the coffee table with a decisive thump. "You worked for the business. Vanessa has actual management experience. She understands finance and marketing and how to run a professional operation. You're good with your hands, Cora, but this requires a different skill set." I looked at Vanessa, waiting for her to say something, waiting for her to tell Mom this was insane. We were sisters. We'd grown up together. Surely she wouldn't just sit there and let this happen. But Vanessa just looked at me with this sad, pitying expression that made me want to throw something. "Cora," she said softly, reaching out like she was going to touch my hand. I jerked away. This isn't personal, okay? Mom just wants to make sure everything is handled properly. You know how you can be sometimes? Impulsive, emotional. This is a big responsibility. Impulsive. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. My whole body was shaking now, but not from sadness anymore. It's from rage. Pure, burning rage. I'm the one who put my entire life on hold for Dad. I'm the one who dropped out of school so I could drive him to radiation treatments. I'm the one who learned his business from the ground up so he wouldn't have to worry about it failing while he was sick. I'm the one who sat with him every single night when he couldn't sleep because the pain was too bad. My voice broke on that last word and tears started streaming down my face. Okay, I couldn't stop them. I'm the one who was there, Vanessa. Where the hell were you? The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler looked uncomfortable. Vanessa's perfect composure cracked just a little. But Mom just stared at me with cold, hard eyes. That's exactly what I'm talking about, she said quietly. You're too emotional. To handle this, Cora, you can't separate your feelings from business decisions. Vanessa can. The decision is final. Vanessa will manage the estate and the business. You can continue working there if you'd like, but you'll report to your sister. Report to my sister. Work for her in the business my father built, the business he taught me to love. I looked at all three of them sitting there, united against me, and something inside me just broke. Not in the way it broke when Dad died. This was different. This was the moment I realized that I was completely alone in my own family. I walked out without saying another word. I got in my truck and drove, not even knowing where I was going. I just needed to get away from that house, from those people who were supposed to love me, but only seemed to know how to hurt me. I ended up at the cemetery, at Dad's grave where the dirt was still fresh and there were flowers everywhere from the funeral. I sat down right there on the ground, not caring that my dress got dirty, and I talked to him like he could still hear me. They took everything. Dad, I whispered, everything you built, everything you wanted me to have, and I don't know what to do. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, and for just a second, I could almost hear his voice. Bennett, women don't run from hard things, Cora. I wiped my eyes and stood up. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to fight back. I tried. God, I really tried to make it work. Every morning for the next 4 months, I woke up at 5 a.m., put on my work boots, and showed up to Dad's construction company like nothing had changed. I ran the crews. I checked on job sites. I dealt with problems as they came up, the same way Dad had taught me. The guys who worked for us, men who'd been with my father for 10, 15, even 20 years, they looked at me like I was their boss, because in every way that mattered, I was. But on paper, I answered to Vanessa. She'd show up maybe once a week, always overdressed in heels that had no business being on a construction site. She'd walk around with her phone in her hand, taking pictures for Instagram, talking about her company, like she had any idea what we actually did. She'd call the guys the workers instead of learning their names. She'd sign papers she didn't understand and make decisions that made no sense. I bit my tongue so many times I'm surprised it didn't fall off. But then the problems started. Little things at first. Supplier calling to say a payment was late. Nothing major, just a few days overdue. I told Vanessa about it. I'll handle it, she said, not even looking up from her phone. The account should have plenty of money, I pressed. Dad always kept a healthy buffer for operating expenses. Cora, I said, I'll handle it. Why do you always have to question everything I do? Because you don't know what you're doing. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just walked away and paid the supplier myself with my own credit card because I couldn't afford to lose that relationship. A week later, it happened again. Then the calls started coming every day. Suppliers I'd worked with for years, people who'd known my father, calling me with confusion and frustration in their voices. Cora, what's going on? Frank Martinez asked me one afternoon. Frank ran the lumber yard, and he'd been one of Dad's closest friends. I've got invoices going back 6 weeks. The checks keep bouncing. My blood went cold. That's impossible. There's over $200,000 in the business account. The silence on the other end of the line lasted too long. Frank, honey, he said, and his voice was so gentle it scared me. I don't know what to tell you. But I can't extend any more. Credit. I've got a business to run too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those bounced checks, about the confusion in Frank's voice. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. At 2 a.m, I finally gave up on sleep and opened my laptop. Dad had given me the login information. For all the business accounts when he first got sick, just in case, Cora, he'd said, something happens to me, you need to be able to access everything. I'd never used it because Mom had control of everything now. But technically, Dad had never removed my access. My hands were shaking as I typed in the password. The screen loaded. I clicked on the business checking account, the one that should have had over $200,000 in it. The balance showed $23.17. I stared at that number until my eyes burned. $23. I refreshed the page, thinking it had to be a mistake, some kind of computer error. But the number didn't change. Over $200,000. Gone. In 4 months, I started going through the transaction history, and with every line I read, I felt sicker. $10,000 transfer, $15,000 transfer, $8,000 here, $12,000 there. Dozens and dozens of withdrawals, all made by Vanessa, all going into her personal account. I clicked. On her personal account, Dad had linked all the family accounts together for easy management, which meant I could see everything. Designer purses from stores I'd never even heard of. $5,000 at a spa in Miami. Plane tickets to Cabo. A brand new BMW for Tyler. Restaurants where a single dinner cost more than I made in a week. A Cartier bracelet. Christian Louboutin shoes. A Gucci handbag. My sister had spent our father's life. Savings on luxuries while I'd been maxing out my credit cards to keep the business running. I sat there in the dark. My laptop screen the only light in the room, and I felt something shift. Inside me, it wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was something colder, clearer, more dangerous. The next morning, I drove straight to Vanessa's apartment. It was in a fancy building downtown, the kind with a doorman and marble floors. I'd never been there before. I'd never been invited. I buzzed her apartment until she answered, annoyed. What, Cora? It's 7 a.m. Let me up. Now, something in my voice must have warned her because she buzzed me in without another word. When she opened her apartment door, she was in silk pajamas that probably cost more than my rent. Behind her, I could see the BMW keys on the counter. A shopping bag from Bergdorf Goodman on the couch. Evidence of her spending everywhere I looked. You stole it? I said. Voice was shaking, but not from fear. From fury so intense, I could barely contain it. You stole everything. $200,000. Dad's entire life savings. You spent it on cars and purses and vacations while I'd been keeping the business alive with my own money. Vanessa's face didn't show guilt, didn't show shame. Just looked annoyed, like I was bothering her with something trivial. I didn't steal anything, she said calmly. Mom put me in charge of the estate. That includes all the accounts. I'm managing the money as I see fit. Managing. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about any of this. You're bankrupting Dad's company. Frank Martinez won't sell us lumber anymore. We've got 3 jobs on hold because we can't pay for materials. The guys haven't gotten their paychecks in 2 weeks because there's no money. That's not my fault, Vanessa said, crossing her arms. Maybe if you were better at bringing in revenue instead of just spending money, we wouldn't have these problems. I stared at my sister, this stranger wearing my sister's face, and I realized something horrible. She actually believed what she was saying. She'd convinced herself that she deserved this money, that she was entitled to it, that spending our father's legacy on designer clothes was somehow justified. You know what the worst part is? I said quietly. Dad trusted you. Even though you were never there, even though you didn't care about his business or his dreams, he still loved you. And you're destroying everything he built like it means nothing. Oh, please. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Don't act like you're some kind of saint, Cora. You're just jealous. You've always been jealous that Mom loves me more, that I'm successful, that I have a real career instead of just getting my hands dirty doing manual labor. Get out, Tyler's voice came from the bedroom. He appeared in the doorway wearing expensive loungewear. She's upsetting you, babe. Make her leave. I looked at both of them. These people living in luxury bought with my father's blood, sweat, and tears, and I felt something click into place. You're right, I said to Vanessa. I can't prove anything. If you're legally in charge. Legally, this is all yours to do with as you please. She smiled, thinking she'd won. Exactly. But I'm not. Done yet, I said. Not even close. I left before I did something I'd regret. But as I walked out of that building, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. I spent the next 3 days in a fog, going through the motions at work while my mind spun in circles. The worst part wasn't even the money. As horrible as that was, the worst part was knowing that my mother had handed Vanessa the keys to everything Dad built, and Vanessa had lit it all on fire without a second thought. And somehow I was supposed to just accept it. Just smile and nod and keep working while my sister destroyed our father's legacy one designer handbag at a time. On the 4th day, I was at a job site when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. This Cora Bennett, a woman's voice, professional but kind. Yes, who's this? My name is Patricia Chen. I'm an attorney. Your father and I worked together a few years ago on a contract dispute. He spoke about you often. I'm so sorry for your loss. I stepped away from the noise of the construction site, my heart starting. £2, thank you. But why are you calling me? I heard through mutual acquaintances that there might be some issues with your father's estate. I wanted to reach out and see if you needed legal counsel. I almost laughed. I can't afford it. Lawyer, I can barely afford groceries right now. I understand, Patricia said gently. Would you be willing to meet with me anyway? It's just a conversation, no charge. I owed your father a favor and I'd like to help if I can. That afternoon, I sat in Patricia's office, which was small but neat, with law books lining every wall. Oh, she was younger than I expected, maybe in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. I told her everything. About Vanessa being put in charge, about the missing money, about the bounced checks and the business falling apart. When I finished, Patricia sat back in her chair and was quiet for a long moment. Do you have documentation? She finally asked. I have bank statements, transaction records. I have Dad's. Will and I have proof that I was the one actually running the business before and after he died. Patricia nodded slowly. Your sister has committed fraud, Cora, possibly embezzlement, and your mother by giving her complete control despite you. Being a rightful heir and clearly capable may have breached her fiduciary duty as executor. Can we fight this? I asked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. We can try, but I need to be honest with you. Cases like this are expensive and they take time. Months, maybe years. There's no guarantee we'll win. My heart sank. Of course. Everything always came back to money. Money I didn't have. Patricia must have seen something in my face because she leaned forward. What if I took this case on contingency? That means I don't get paid unless we win. If we do win, I'd take a percentage of whatever we recover. I stared at her. Why would you do that? You don't even know me. Patricia looked down at her hands, and for the first time, her professional composure cracked just a little. I had a sister once, older, beautiful, perfect in my parents' eyes. When my father died, she convinced my mother to leave her everything. She sold my father's business to the highest bidder without thinking twice, pocketed the money, and moved. To California, I never saw a penny. I'm sorry, I whispered. I was young. I didn't know how to fight back. I didn't know I could. Patricia looked up at me, and her eyes were fierce. But you can, Cora. Let me help you. Let me be what I wish someone had been for me. I felt tears streaming down my face before I even realized I was crying. Okay. I managed to say, okay, let's fight. The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. And that's saying something considering I'd already watched my father die and lost everything that mattered to me. I worked 3 jobs. In the mornings, I still showed up to Dad's company, trying to keep it alive with duct tape and prayers. In the afternoons, I worked at a hardware store. At night, I waitressed at a diner until 2 in the morning. I slept. Maybe 4 hours a night, living on coffee and pure stubborn will. But every spare moment I had, I documented everything. Every expense Vanessa made. Every bill she didn't pay. Every client we lost because she made promises she didn't understand and couldn't keep. Every worker who quit because their paychecks bounced. I created spreadsheets that would make an accountant weep with joy. I saved emails. I recorded phone calls with suppliers. I built a case brick by brick, the same way Dad had taught me to build houses. One piece at a time, making sure the foundation was solid. Meanwhile, Mom kept calling. At first, her messages were angry. Cora, why are you being so difficult? Why can't you just support your sister? Then they became defensive. You don't understand business like Vanessa does. You're just creating problems. I stopped listening to the voicemails. I stopped reading her texts. I had nothing left to say to her until the day she called crying. And against my better judgment, I answered. Cora, she sobbed. I need your help. The bank is foreclosing on the house. I felt like I'd been punched. What are you talking about? Dad paid off that house 10 years ago. I know, but there's a lien on it now. The bank says someone took out a home equity loan and hasn't made any payments. They're going to take the house, Cora. Where am I going to live? I closed my eyes. I already knew the answer before I asked the question. Mom, did you take out a loan? No, I would never. Did Vanessa? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Mom, I said, my voice deadly calm. How much? $80,000. She was crying harder now. She said she needed it for the business, for cash flow. She promised she'd pay it back. She promised Cora. $80,000. On top of the $200,000 she'd already stolen. My sister had mortgaged our mother's home and then defaulted on the loan like it meant nothing. Cora, please, Mom begged. Do you have to help me? You have to talk to Vanessa. Do you have to? Fix this. Something inside me that had been bending and bending finally snapped clean in half. No, I said. What? No, Mom. I don't have to do anything. You chose Vanessa. You gave her everything. You looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't mature enough, wasn't responsible enough. So figure it out with her. She's the one you trusted. Cora, please, I'm your mother. A mother protects her children, I said, and my voice broke. A mother sees them for who they really are. A mother doesn't choose favorites and throw the other one away like garbage. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the phone down. But I didn't feel guilty. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel guilty for standing up to my mother. I called Patricia. I want to file the lawsuit not just against Vanessa, against Mom too. Cora, are you sure? Adding your mother to the suit will make this even more complicated, I'm sure, I said. She enabled all of this. She gave Vanessa control, knowing she wasn't capable. She ignored Dad's wishes. She chose to destroy me to protect her favorite daughter. I want her held accountable. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, all right, let's do it. Let's make them answer for what they've done. As I hung up the phone, I thought about Dad, about how he'd taught me that doing the right thing wasn't always easy. That sometimes standing up for yourself meant standing alone. I hope you're proud of me, Dad. I whispered to the empty room because I'm finally fighting back. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 7 months after Dad's funeral. Patricia called me right after. She submitted the paperwork to the court. It's done, she said. They'll be served by the end of the week. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of the hardware store where I was supposed to start my shift in 10 minutes, and I just breathed. In and out. In and out. This was real now. There was no going back. My phone rang 3 days later. Mom, I let it go to voicemail. Then Vanessa called. Voicemail. Then Mom again, and again, and again. 17 calls in 2 hours. I turned my phone off and went to work. When I finally listened to the messages that night, Mom's voice was shrill with panic. How could you do this to your own family? How could you be so selfish? We can talk about this, Cora. We can work this out. You don't need to involve lawyers and courts. Please just call me back. Vanessa's message was different. Cold, threatening. You're going to regret this, Cora. You have no idea what you're doing. I have the best lawyers money can buy. Your little case is going nowhere. All you're doing is embarrassing yourself. I saved every single message. Evidence the next few months blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and determination. I worked. My 3 jobs. I met with Patricia every week, sometimes twice a week, going over documents and preparing for depositions. The business was barely hanging on by a thread, but some of the old crew stuck with me. Men like Frank Martinez, who started extending credit again once he heard I was fighting back. Your dad would be proud of you, kid, Frank told me one day. When I picked up a lumber order, how many people have the guts to stand up to family? I don't feel gutsy, I admitted. I feel terrified. Courage isn't not being scared, Frank said, putting a hand on my shoulder. It's being scared and doing it anyway. If your old man taught you that? In December, we had our first major hearing. I walked into that courthouse in the only professional outfit I owned, a blazer I'd bought at Goodwill for $12. My hands were sweating. My stomach was in knots. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours the night before. Vanessa showed up in a designer suit with 2 expensive lawyers, flanking her like bodyguards. Mom was with her, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. When our eyes met across the hallway, she looked away first. That small moment somehow hurt more than everything else combined. The hearing was procedural, mostly about what evidence would be admissible. But at one point, Vanessa's lawyer tried to argue that I had no standing to sue because I'd never been officially part of the estate. Patricia stood up. Her voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. Your Honor, Miss Cora Bennett ran her father's business for 2 years before his death and continued to do so after. She has paid over $40,000 of her own money to keep that business afloat and to pay her mother's mortgage. She has more standing in this case than anyone. The judge looked at me over his glasses. Is this true, Miss Bennett? I stood up, my legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor. Every word. He nodded slowly and made a note. Vanessa's lawyer sat down, his argument dismissed. We won that hearing. Not the whole case, but that battle. It was the first time I'd won anything in so long that I almost forgot what it felt like. But the real breakthrough came in January. When Patricia called me with excitement, I'd never heard in her voice before. Cora, I need you to come to my office right now. Found something. I drove there on my lunch break, still in my hardware store vest. Patricia's desk was covered in papers. I've been going through your father's files, she said, her eyes bright. The ones you gave me from his home office, and I found this. She handed me a letter. The paper was slightly yellowed, the handwriting unmistakably my father's. It was dated April 15th, 2 years before he died. Before he got really sick, when he was still himself. My hands trembled as I read it. To my attorney, Robert Mitchell, it began. This letter serves as an addendum to my will and an expression of my wishes regarding my estate and business. Want to make absolutely clear that my daughter Cora is to have full control of Bennett Construction upon my death. She has learned this business from the ground up. She understands every aspect of it. She has the skill, the dedication, and the heart to carry on what I've built. I trust her completely and without reservation. While I love both my daughters, only Cora has shown the commitment and capability to run this company. This is my explicit wish and instruction. The letter was signed, dated, and notarized. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face before I could speak. Why didn't this get filed? Why isn't this in the official will? Patricia's jaw was tight. That's what I'm wondering. This should have been attached to the primary will. Your father sent this to his attorney. But somehow, when your mother executed the estate, this letter never appeared. She filed a different version. She hid it. I whispered. Mom found this and hid it. That's what it looks like. And Cora, if we can prove that, this changes everything. This isn't just about fraud anymore. This is about deliberately subverting your father's documented wishes. This is about your mother and sister conspiring to deny you what your father explicitly wanted you to have. I looked down at my father's handwriting, at the words I trust her completely. And something broke open inside my chest. All those years of being told I wasn't good enough, wasn't mature enough, wasn't responsible enough. And here was proof, in my father's own hand, that he'd believed in me all along. She knew, I said, my voice barely audible. All this time, Mom knew this is what Dad wanted, and she did it anyway. Patricia nodded grimly. The question is, can you handle what comes next? Because when we present this in court, it's going to destroy any relationship you have left with your mother. I've thought about that for a long moment. About family dinners I'd never attend. About holidays I'd spend alone. About the fact that my own mother had chosen to betray me and my father's memory rather than admit I was worthy. I don't have a relationship. With her, I finally said, not a real one. Maybe I never did. Then let's finish this, Patricia said. I looked at my father's letter one more time, tracing the signature with my finger. Yeah, I said, let's finish it. That night, I went to the cemetery, to Dad's grave, where I'd been dozens of times over the past year. I sat down on the cold ground and pulled out the letter. I found it, Dad, I told him. I found your real wishes, and I'm going to make sure they're honored. I promise you that. No matter what it costs me, I'm going to make this right. The wind rustled through the bare trees, and somewhere in the distance, I heard a bird call. For the first time in a year, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone. Dad was still with me. In that letter, in everything he'd taught me, think the strength he'd given me to fight. And I was going to win this. Not for revenge, not even for the money. For him, the trial was set for late March, almost exactly 1 year after Dad's funeral. The night before, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat on my apartment floor surrounded by boxes of documents and wondered if I was strong enough for what was coming. Patricia had warned me. They're going to try to make you look bad, Cora. They'll bring up every mistake you've ever made. The college dropout thing. Any late payment, any impulsive decision, they'll paint you as unstable and irresponsible. Let them, I'd said. But now, in the darkness of my apartment, I wasn't so sure. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more intimate. There was nowhere to hide. I sat next to Patricia at our table. My hands folded so tightly my knuckles were white. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat with her 2 lawyers, looking confident and put together in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my truck. Mom sat in the row behind her, refusing to look at me. The judge entered. The Honorable Thomas Warren, an older black man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He settled into his chair and looked out at all of us. This is a difficult case, he began. Family disputes always are. But we're here to determine the truth and to honor the wishes of the deceased, Mr. Robert Bennett. Let's proceed. The first 2 days were brutal. Vanessa's lawyers did exactly what Patricia said they would. They brought up my incomplete degree. Kay showed credit card statements proving I'd been in debt. Kay questioned my judgment, my stability, my capability. Isn't it true, Miss Bennett? Vanessa's lead attorney asked that you dropped out of college because you couldn't handle the academic pressure. I looked him right in the eye. No, I dropped out because my father was dying and he needed me. Someone had to run his business while he went through chemotherapy. Someone had to drive him to appointments and make sure he ate and help him shower. When he was too weak to stand, that someone was me. But you never went back to finish your degree. No, I said quietly, because after Dad died, I was too busy trying to keep his business alive and paying my mother's mortgage so she wouldn't lose her home. I saw the judge write something down. Vanessa took the stand on the third day. She was polished and practiced, talking about her business degree and her management experience. She made it sound like she'd been doing me a favor by taking over the estate. I was trying to protect the family assets, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Cora is my sister and I love her, but she's always been impulsive, emotional. I was worried she'd run the business into the ground. Tricia stood for cross-examination. Bennett, can you tell the court how much money was in the business account when you took control? I don't recall the exact amount. Patricia smiled. Let me refresh your memory. $207,000. And how much is in that account now? Vanessa shifted in her seat. Business has been slow. $23, miss. Bennett, you drained over $200,000 in 6 months. Can you explain where that money went? Operating expenses, payroll, normal business costs. Patricia pulled out a thick folder. These are bank statements showing your personal spending during those 6 months. $42,000 at luxury retailers. $15,000 on a vacation to Cabo. A $28,000 car for your boyfriend. Are these normal business expenses? The courtroom was dead silent. Vanessa's face had gone pale. I used some of the money for personal expenses, but I was planning to pay it back with what money? Patricia's voice was sharp. The business you bankrupted, the estate you depleted, or were you planning to take out another loan against your mother's house? Oh wait, you already did that. $80,000. And you haven't made a single payment. Vanessa started crying. Real tears this time, not the practiced ones. But I felt nothing watching her fall apart. Nothing but a cold, clear sense of justice. Then came my mother's testimony. She walked to the stand looking 20 years older than she had a year ago. Her hands shook as she was sworn in. Vanessa's lawyer started with softball questions, letting Mom talk about how hard it had been to lose Dad. How she just wanted to make sure the estate was handled properly. Then Patricia stood up, and I saw my mother's face go white. Mrs. Bennett, do you recognize this letter? Patricia handed her the document we'd found. Dad's letter stating his wishes. Mom's hands trembled as she took it. Yes. Can you read the date for the court? April 15th. Her voice was barely a whisper. 2 years before your husband passed away. He wrote this letter to his attorney, explicitly stating that he wanted Cora to run his business. You found this letter, didn't you? Silence. Mrs. Bennett, I'll remind you that you're under oath. Yes, Mom finally said. I found it, and you hid it. You executed a different version of the will that gave everything to Vanessa, even though you knew your husband's true wishes. I thought I was doing the right thing, Mom said, and now she was crying too. Cora was so young, so impulsive. I thought Vanessa would be better at what? Stealing? Fraud? Bankrupting a business your husband spent 30 years building? Mom buried her face in her hands. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom. Mrs. Bennett, look at me. Mom slowly raised her head. Did you deliberately conceal your husband's documented wishes to favor one daughter over another? The pause felt like it lasted a lifetime. Yes, Mom whispered. Yes, I did. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel. Vanessa's lawyers were frantically conferring. And I just sat there watching my family implode, feeling oddly detached from it all. After a recess, the judge delivered his ruling. I've reviewed all the evidence presented in this case, the bank statements, the testimony, and most importantly, Mr. Bennett's letter expressing his explicit wishes. This is one of the clearest cases of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty I've seen in my career. I looked directly at my mother and sister. Mrs. Bennett, you deliberately subverted your husband's wishes. Miss Vanessa Bennett, you committed fraud and embezzlement. You stole from your father's estate and nearly destroyed his business. Then he turned to me. Miss Cora Bennett, I'm granting you full control of your father's estate and business as he clearly intended. Your sister will be required to repay every dollar she stole with interest. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. He paused and his expression softened slightly. Your mother called you? Immature and irresponsible. She said you couldn't handle this responsibility. But from where I'm sitting, having reviewed months of evidence, you're the only adult in this family. You kept a business running while working 3 jobs. You paid your mother's mortgage while she was actively working against you. You honored your father's memory while everyone else was looting his legacy. That's not immaturity, Miss Bennett. That's character. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. These weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of vindication, of relief, of finally being seen for who I really was.